Okay, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about why saxophone is such a difficult instrument and why I believe saxophone is the most difficult wind instrument to play. Now, the physical effort of playing saxophone is fantastically easy compared to that of other wind or air powered instruments, but that's not really what I'm talking about. All right, so let's get to it. One of the key aspects of playing any musical instrument really is all about developing your tone. We are at an extreme disadvantage because of the basic methods of tone production. The basic methods of tone production involve understanding overtones. These are fundamental. And because our octave key is so efficient at helping us play overtones, we never learn these fundamental principles. So later in life, when we actually want to get good at our instrument and sound good in the whole bit, we lack these fundamentals. Flute players and brass players, they have to understand this from day one. And of course they don't, so they just guess. And it's years and years of guessing of what to approximate with your airspeed, your embouchure pressure and whatnot in order to get the right note to come out. Because if they don't have it right, the instrument will not let them play it properly. If we don't have it right, we just push our magic button and we get our sound. But later, that comes back to haunt you. That's the real reason why so many of these tone production books are so difficult, because they're going all the way back and reteaching you not just how to play a saxophone properly, but actually how the saxophone works. We need to be able to outdo the mechanism that makes it easy. So when we want to extend our range, play with full tone, be able to play with consistency amongst all the notes and the registers, we have to understand the fundamentals of overtone production. So you got to go all the way back to the beginning and start from ground one. And this can be catastrophically difficult. In this video, I want to talk about the most difficult aspect of playing saxophone. Ultimately, that's going to come down to what someone expects you to be able to do if you play the saxophone. Now, obviously, you got to have a nice tone. This is going to be very, very challenging and very expensive. So let's talk about mouthpieces. I just made a video where I hinted about there not really being a book on how to play a saxophone mouthpiece. And a saxophone mouthpiece is everything. As far as your equipment goes, it's everything. It's the unicorn, it's our doom, it's our fate, it's all of that stuff. So how come there aren't any books that really teach you how to play a mouthpiece? The saxophone mouthpiece is one of the things that really separates our instrument from the rest of the wind-powered instruments, because we have an extraordinary amount of diversity, and technically speaking, across the globe of saxophone playing, we don't have a set standard. And this can be very, very difficult. Now, amongst classical saxophone, there's definitely a standardized tone and a general standardized way mouthpieces are made. But when it comes to anything outside of that, the sky's the limit. Where do you even start? How do you know if you're doing it right when you get this mouthpiece versus another one? What were the manufacturer's intentions with getting another one? And I'm telling you right now, mouthpieces are very expensive, especially if you have a whole bunch of them. So when it comes to mouthpieces, I generally recommend kind of the standards depending on what style you prefer. So for classical saxophone, that's C-Star, or even maybe the Yamaha mouthpiece. When it comes to jazz, Autolink, Dukov, these types of Meyer for alto saxophone, these really tried and true mouthpieces that the greats that we transcribe are playing. So that way we can lock into that standard. And then when you start to develop your own individual sound, which is going to be very difficult to do, you at least have a solid foundation. As a former cruise ship musician, on the last ship that I was on, the expectation of me as a saxophone player was to be fluent on 8 instruments. So we're looking at soprano, alto, tenor, bari, clarinet, bass clarinet, piccolo, and flute. Now, I'm on the gig with another sax player, same expectation, trumpet player, another trumpet player, and a trombone player. Now, the trombone player's expectation, one trombone, maybe a mute or two. So I have to be fluent on all those instruments. So all the time and effort that I spent into developing my tenor sound, because I consider myself a tenor player, I have to recreate all of that on alto, soprano, bari sax, flute, piccolo, clarinet, and bass clarinet. This instrument that everybody thought was so easy to play, now my expectations of what I should be able to do with this instrument are absolutely mind-boggling. Can you imagine spending just 10 years trying to develop your tenor sound? Oh, now I got alto. Now I got to go through the whole gamut of trying to find my sound on that instrument, and then soprano, and then bari, and then all the other ones. And when it comes to playing doubles, never ever think of yourself as a doubler. If you double on flute, somebody's going to pay you to play flute. Now you're a flute player, because no one's going to write the music easily so the saxophone doubler can play it. These people generally have no idea how difficult this stuff is. So they just write it. They just write, oh yeah, the can-can. That's a little silly happy tune. Yeah, right? No. I did a video on an easy way of playing that Gershwin lick. That thing comes up all the time. So my recommendation for you, if you're going into college as a freshman, if you're an alto player, your first semester, get going on some flute lessons. Usually the alto player covers the flute, the lead flute, and then the tenor player covers the lead clarinet part. So first semester, alto player, flute. Second semester, get some clarinet going. And with tenor, first semester, get some clarinet going. Second semester, get some flute going. So that way you are good to go. And I'm telling you right now, they do not care if it's your main instrument or not. You need to have that fluency on those instruments. So now, developing a good tone and all those little fundamental things that you maybe didn't do when you started playing saxophone, now you absolutely positively have to do that with flute and clarinet. Minimum. That is your absolute minimum requirement generally, is if you're an alto or tenor player, alto, tenor, flute, clarinet, like those 4. Okay. As you can imagine, that is absolutely daunting. Okay, let's move on. So as you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to get expensive. In general, I recommend that you have at least 4 different mouthpieces. But let me explain this so that way you don't go out and spend all your money. If you're kind of a weekend warrior saxophone player, then a whole lot of this stuff, you'll never really get there, and the expectations of you as a saxophone player won't be there as much. But people will still expect you to be able to have this kind of fluency. So in terms of mouthpieces, if you do any kind of classical music, definitely need a classical saxophone mouthpiece. A jazz mouthpiece, some kind of rock, funk, R&B type of mouthpiece that may be a little different, brighter or darker than your jazz sound, and then like one kind of backup auxiliary mouthpiece. I have probably over 50 now, well over 50 across soprano, alto, tenor, and bari, so, and clarinet for that matter. But as you can see, 4 mouthpieces for each saxophone can be pretty daunting. And I'm not even getting into saxophones themselves. So working musician, the more saxophones you have, the more you can work, the more you can gig. All right, I'm trying to get a bari and an alto. There's 2 things in all of music that I feel really are the most difficult, because you have to be taught how to do it, which is reading music, specifically transposing music, and improvisation, specifically jazz improvisation. These are things that you're not really just going to be able to do. You're going to need instruction in order to do that. When it comes to reading music, it goes right back to what I talked about with playing saxophone and not learning the fundamentals. So think about it. If you play the saxophone, you got your magic high note button doing all the work. You got to go back and relearn how to do it. This is what transposition is. All of our music that's written for our instrument is actually written wrong. It's just easier to transfer the fingering system from one instrument to another. But playing alto, tenor, you're going to have to transpose. And you're going to sometimes need to transpose from tenor, reading an alto part, and from alto, reading a tenor part. Sometimes it's just far more practical to just read it on that one instrument. I went a whole ship contract. In fact, I went 2 ship contract, now that I think about it. Playing tenor and just reading alto music. And believe me, it is very difficult. I had to work on it all the time. I had to get the music ahead of time and just go through pretty much just every single note until my brain would start to just get used to where everything was. Then there was this weird little period where I'd be reading tenor music and I would just switch for some reason. But the other thing is jazz improvisation. And as a saxophone player, you better believe that this is going to be one of the expectations that someone who will want to pay you to play this instrument expects you to be able to do. And in the real world, man, believe me, it is. You run into a lot of people that just can't do it at all, and a lot of people that can't do it well. So learning jazz improvisation, learning the proper articulation, understanding the music theory, these are the kind of things that come with the saxophone, and they can be extremely daunting. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so to name some shows like Chorus Line Producers, West Side Story, definitely you're looking at piccolo, flute, alto flute. There was a show before everything went down, Sister Act, where there was an alto flute double. Flute player was kind of freaking out about it. But you're looking at oboe, English horn, bass sax, bass clarinet. I mean, as these orchestras get smaller and smaller, our workload just keeps piling up. When I was on cruise ships, we never got paid any more money to play all these extra instruments. So not only do I feel like I'm being cheated and underpaid, but now I'm getting beat at the airport having to bring all this stuff. So you really got to take these things into consideration. And like I said before, I haven't even factored in the cost of learning these instruments. To acquire an oboe, and now I have to learn how to do reeds. And then there's another English horn book that's there. Now I got to learn that. I mean, you have to be able to budget this thing wisely. Saxophones themselves, if you want to get good ones, you want to develop your own personal sound, if you want to work, basically. So take these things into consideration, especially if you're not a saxophone player. Next time you're like, oh, your instrument's so easy. It's like, yeah, okay. But, if we can get the work, you got to do the job. You got to learn it. So I hope I was able to shed some light on how fantastically difficult it can be to be a fully functioning, working saxophone player. All right, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. See ya.